another devlog. This is week number 87. Um, so the first part of the week, day one stuff, I was finishing up work on I was finishing up work on the main behavior graph for the biomutant, specifically functionality, the last bit of functionality surrounding what happens when the AI is killed, what state they should transition to this dead state and stay there indefinitely. And any sort of cleanup that's required, like if they're currently shooting, they should stop shooting and aiming and all that kind of stuff. So kind of tested that out and bottled it up. And then the last thing for the entire graph was the behavior, um, what you should do, what the AI should do when the actual target is dead. And since it's so well structured, you can actually do certain things upon that event. So um, instead of just returning, setting idle state and returning immediately to patrol, you can actually interpret the actual event. Say the target is dead, and then you can add custom behavior on top of that line of logic saying, um, detecting if he's dead, then I think, yeah, you could like conditional here, target is dead. You actually set custom behavior based off that case to say, okay, I'm actually wait 5 seconds before returning to patrol, things like that. So designing specific behavior per case transition, it's all possible. Um, so I kind of, after that, I kind of moved on, and for the next thing, like I already kind of did this and proved it as a prototype concept, but I went to the treasure bug, and for some reason, sometimes these get out of whack. They like to take the subtree here and actually pop in the actual whole node structure down here. Usually a unit restart clears it up, but basically I had to it was already constructed, but it's basically just for the NPC. I just made sure these two states are working and tested out, and and now the NPC cleanly has um, inherited behaviors without all the other extra overhead of like all the other functionality like shooting, detection, you know. So it just has idle and patrol. So that's exactly what we wanted. And then after that, I started working on the snake AI, and this is where it really it really comes together, because now if you look, I created a whole new main behavior graph tree for the snake AI, and he basically, as a foundation, he basically inherits all the behavior, or most of the behavior, of the original base shooter AI. But I've structured him properly where he inherits from like a melee AI, but all these other common subtrees. So I basically took the other graph and just copied it over, which you can do without having to painstakingly create and connect each node and, copy it by hand. You can actually paste in the whole thing. And then from this structure, you can modify it as needed. So right now, there was a couple bumps I had to go in and actually make sure and test that all the references are connected, all the wires are plugged in. But it took me like a half an hour to an hour to actually create a whole new root behavior tree for this new AI role, and just now I can just swap out the shooter attack for the HK attack, so its own custom tree. So all this logic is the same and copied over. And the nice thing is now, like, if if I have a lot of role classes, I can continue to abstract behavior to my heart's content. I just have a more just a copied main root behavior tree, so I can customize it from this level. But in theory, I could actually abstract the both of them if I wanted to. But I think it makes sense right now to kind of keep this overall structure duplicated, so I can modify it on a AI behavior role level. So the point is that I could abstract commonality further if if needed when it calls for it. But right now it's like I have the same structure, but I'm reusing the common behavior like chase, detection, and everything like that. But now the difference between this AI role, he has a specialized attack, which is basically it's unique to his role. So this is exactly what we were going for, and the setup is like much more expedited than creating a whole duplicate graph by hand for every AI role like this. So it's just not practical this way. So that was the whole thing of why I spent a couple of weeks moving to this new system. And so that was all looking good. I was testing out the snake, and he has all the shared behavior, and everything's looking good in that department. So I made a list of, like, when I was testing. There's a bunch of stuff with him that I have to sort out. Like right now, his placeholder, his attack is just a placeholder. That's one of the things. Another thing that I want to fix is his tail on this animation. He basically, I want to do like a procedural animation to where his tail is actually, the bones of his tail aren't driven by the animation alone. They're actually procedurally controlled. That way it'll allow him to, when he kind of turns, his tail swings around and clips through the walls and stuff. I don't really want that. So that's one of the things. But so I made a list of things that are going to need to be worked on, like from like lowest to highest priority. His chase is pretty good, but it needs a lot of work and polishing. The main thing, his main functionality is his unique patrol functionality. There's going to be a whole system behind that where he's not just patrolling the static. Right now he has a inherited patrol functionality to go into waypoints and stuff, and that's fine. But his main patrolling will be kind of determined dynamically by a system, like an AI director system that kind of knows where the player is. So we're really jumping into this HK prototype now, and it's it's starting to come together. Now that we have the behavior tree situation all sorted out for the most part, we can actually proceed on to working on this guy here. So that was the first day. So after I got the chase all kind of working a little better, I just had to increase the stopping distance. That was pretty expedited. I went on to the next problem of the actual grab kill, right? When the controller gets close, it should execute a grab kill. Well, I needed some animations. I already had the animation for the snake for the grab kill, but I needed an animation for the character to kind of like, when the grab is executed, to kind of, look like they're being bound up. So kind of, yeah, anyways, sometimes this, I'll go over this, this whatchamacallit here, this new thing, but sometimes it likes to, if you're in play mode, it likes to get out of sync. It likes to, it'll put it in here, and then it'll turn off all the renderers for your, just so it can operate, but it just got into the state where I had to kind of fix the renderers and reset it. So I I have to think about when it gets in that state, how am I going to fix it, but I think I fixed it here. It's kind of odd. But anyways, I was envisioning some sort of animation when you get grabbed, kind of like that. Um, but so I kind of went to my usual sources. I went to the Unity asset store, and I I looked for an animation that I could use for this, right? But I couldn't find anything on the asset store, and I couldn't find anything in Mexico, and I just couldn't find anything anywhere. Like, it's just like, how am I gonna get an animation? There's some trap, but it did nothing. Kind of looked what I was envisioning to, like, you know, getting grabbed by a snake tail, right? You know, how do I create something like this, right? So I was just like, I was kind of resigned at this point. I was like, I'm one of my things that, you know, for a solo project is not to spend a lot of time doing custom animations, custom animation work. It takes a lot of time, and I'm not really a talented artist or whatever. So I always had the plan, like, if I really needed to do a custom animation, I have a rig set up in Blender in order to kind of do that if it was a really requirement. Like, I had a need for a custom animation with like a skip hop on shooting strafe, but like I decided not to do that because the juice wasn't worth the squeeze or whatever. But now it's like I have a requirement for this. Like, what am I gonna do? There's no animation I can reuse. I could use. I had like I'm gonna have to create a custom animation from scratch or figure out how to modify an animation to fit my needs. Like, luckily I had some sort of system like that set up in Blender already where I could remap an existing animation and make edits to it in Blender. Like, I had already had that system work done. So I popped open Blender, my old Blender file, and you know, I hadn't worked with it in a while, and I started to kind of go to the action editor, look at all my look at all my previous animations that were in there before, and kind of try to add a new action animation and map kind of a new, you know, like I usually do, like map a new animation and then modify it, right? Well, for some reason, the actual what you're seeing now is the Rigify rig, right? You can go and you can go and move it around with IK and FK in order to animate or whatever, right? Okay, that's fine. But for some reason, the actual Rigify, what you're seeing here now, was completely broken. All you would actually see is like this you'd see this bone structure that's pretty much locked to like the animation of whatever the topmost animation is in the NLA editor. For the life of me, I just could not. I don't know what it was like. Um, you know, in pose mode, like clicking these on and off, just the handles were gone. Right? There's no handles to control. Like, and then you could see the bones and select the bones, but you could not manipulate the bones. You could not reset, like, let's see, like this. Here you can say A Alt G R S, and it'll reset the to the rest pose, right? There's no handles, and the bones couldn't be moved, so it was like. So I was kind of panicking at this point because in the back of my mind I knew what this meant, you know what I'm saying? If the actual IK rig is broken, you know, I could fix it by regenerating the rig and all that rigmarole, but once you do that, you've pretty much destroyed the foundation of your FBX, right? And not only is it a lot of work to repair and rebuild the rig, there's a whole, like, I kind of knew in the back of my mind what it would involve in order to get it working. So I was like desperately like, at first I was like, oh, you know, it's just me. I'm new at Blender, but then I realized that the state of my Blender file, you know, the Rigify, whatever happened, like you open it up again, there was a new version or whatever, the Rigify rig is broken. There's no IK handles. You can't break it out of this lock state. So I had to eventually, after desperately trying to fix it, I eventually came to the realization that it's gone. There's no backup. There's no nothing. Like you're going to have to, if you want your IK rig back and be able to work with it, um, you're going to have to regenerate the rig. And like I didn't have a meta rig lying around, that'd been gone. Like I thought I could discard it or whatever, so I couldn't just simply, even if you regenerate from the meta rig, the legacy meta rig, you're still starting over because you're regenerating the bone structure, like, and everything's built off the armature structure. So after really trying to desperately repair it, like I kind of eventually bit the bullet and be like, I have to do this because what am I gonna do? Like I need a custom animation, and if I can't map an animation, or I can't even like manipulate the pose of the armature, I can't hope to even yeah to, I can't even hope to even do any sort of custom animation. So I was hoping, it's like I was hoping not to get snared into a fox trap, but like I was really had no choice. So I bit the bullet and I went and relearned and reviewed and figured out how to, I got my old Blender version was like 4.1.1, so I updated to the latest Blender and I updated to the latest Rigify and Rococo or whatever, and pretty much began the process again of regenerating a rig and placing all the bones for the hands and all that, and it's just a lot of work. And so I got that all set up and made sure it's all clean and very very methodically saving along the way and whatnot. Um and I just wanted to get that working. So I kind of I got the armature working and I imported it to Unity just to see what the damage was. And um so basically I've done this several times before and I kind of knew it was in store for me. There's a lot built on top of it, and like it was just a huge, it's always a huge headache every time you have to swap out the mesh and the FBX. There's a lot of things built on top of it. So it looked okay, but I kind of had to figure out like I did this once before, but everything was broken. One of the things I needed for my Magica was like a bone structure for this piece of hair here, the ponytail, and then the actual tail. When I imported the generated from the Mega, the first armature, I kind of had to remember, like, oh yeah, like the actual armature rig that that Rigify generates, um, right from the meta rig, the actual bone structure. It does this crazy bone structure in order to do like all these IK handles and stuff. But the actual bone structure that Unity expects is not compatible with what the Rigify generates in Blender. And I was kind of like, oh dang, what am I gonna do now? Until I remembered there's like this third-party script or add-on that you can actually take a Rigify generated rig and you can actually convert it into a format that Unity will accept. Well, that's great. I figured that out and got that into Unity, and like all of a sudden, like, okay, my Rigify structure is green now. So if you look at the break anything, but basically you want to apply, and it'll read your armature structure and look for like a connected structure that it can identify as like head and hands, like according to whatever their mechanism model is. and then you can look. It's the strangest thing. I have no idea. It's working off an old FBX or the newest FBX, and this is not. But anyways, it'll give you you want this all to be green in order for it to recognize it as a valid mechanism armature. Just get out of this. I don't need any of that. But so, but the problem was that I had to add these custom bones, and the actual conversion from to the Unity format, it was actually not able to take these custom bones and add it into the final exported rig. So I actually had to figure out and get into the Python script, and I had to. Let's actually see it. Yeah, this will only show the Rigify bones, but I had to figure out, I had to get into the Python script, and after like manually doing a little bit of reparating with my custom bones, I was actually able to write a little bit of Python with the help of AI to actually get those bones properly placed within the hierarchy to generate a rig that has the custom bones included, right, as deform bones, and that the work, you know, there's a certain settings you have to set as deform, otherwise when you import here, Unity won't be able to use them as bones in order to deform the mesh. Just a lot of different things, but I finally got it working. Took some doing. It was a little bit different of a process. It's certainly, I'm not sure how I got it, those extra bones, into Unity beforehand. Maybe I broke my IK rig in the process, being able to do that previously, but now I'm able to have an IK rig with extra custom bones exported to Unity. So got that all situated, and the next step was kind of the brutal part where I had to go in now, and every time you change the rig, you have to reparent the bones to the mesh, and that means weight painting, because more often than not, the automatic weight painting is it works. It works most of the time. So weight paint. Yeah, it works most of the time for most of the things, but you just have to go in and validate that each bone is properly. Each bone is properly weight painted, and the toughest part is like making sure, like especially this affects animation, and making sure that it's not obvious, but then you have to kind of test. So what I was doing is kind of inefficient. I was making a pass on the weight painting, maybe make sure everything looks good. Then I'd import it to Unity, and then I would go and test, like, you know, just walking and crouching and stuff, and then I'd see things like you're always gonna have like rogue pixels like sticking out, or things are not weight painted automatically properly, and then, you know, just things look off with the animation in Unity. So you kind of have to make iterations, go back again, you know, do another pass, go back again until everything's looking pretty good. I think the toughest part is actually with the crouching, making it looking decent, because you really get this IK stretching on the crouching. One of the things I found that if you, instead of exporting each pass, you can actually do something like, if you wanted to test like crouching, I guess you could import the animation here, but what you do, you just you kind of put it in a crouch like that, and then you test how the actual mesh deforms based on your weight painting, and you can really make sure it looks, you know, pretty decent before you go and export, because each time you export to Unity, there's a whole setup. You have to place it in here, generate the avatar, set a bunch of stuff each time, and it just really, you know, it's time consuming that way. So anyways, so it took some time to re-weight paint anything. I didn't want to do this, but, you know, it's like you need to get the weight painting right. Along the way, though, I actually figured out some actual improvements. I had an issue with weight painting before because this whole belt thing was actually separate from the pants, and I figured out a way to actually. I tried to join these meshes together, but the actual UVs would always get messed up. Like this would turn black, and I wanted to keep the UV painting for these belts. I couldn't figure out how to do it, but if you go in here and you rename the actual just select the pants. If you rename the actual UV map to the same name and you join, the system will actually know to preserve both of the joined meshes and not actually not actually lose data for one. So that's great. So now these act more as one with the weight painting, and they're not separate weight painting. So when you're crouching, so now I can kind of scale these down so they're not like these loops are not sticking way out, and it looks a lot better. So once I figured that out, I could actually do a lot of joining of a lot of other things like the shoes and stuff, like make sure that, the shoes are, a lot of them are still separate, but I don't have like all these independent objects that I have to keep separate because of the different UV layouts. I could have them as one and then weight paint them all together. One of the things I did notice as well, if I go here, so I actually joined all these together, but even with joining, I was noticing that on crouching, this was always broken, on crouching with this model, even joining, you would still get these large mesh gaps. Like it would just be like this invisible space. So I had to go in here and actually, sometimes you have to go in here and actually stitch together, like physically stitch together the meshes. So when it does deform, there are no like gaps in between the meshes. So a little bit of extra work there. So, but one of the other things I did, I actually took the time to fix the front hair a little bit better. It's not kind of just, pressed into there and cut off. It actually looks like you can actually see some of these details a little bit better. Just a little bit of polish on the front hair. So a little bit of work there. So I fixed a few things about the mesh. So at this point, I was not going to abandon the changes because this is actually an improvement over the last model in some ways. But I finally got the weight painting all good and tested out and looking fine in Unity, which is a whole freaking process. And that kind of brought me, it took a couple days. And I was kind of stressing like on Tuesday, Wednesday, because the last thing I want to do is redo work or rebuild a controller or mess up my IK, if I don't have to. But I was pretty much forced in this situation. It's just like the cost of doing business. But anyways, that kind of brings us to the end of the week here. Okay, so at the end of the week, I was rebuilding the controller, and like I said, to my dismay, the actual weapon IK is completely broken. Like, I was able to get the a more efficient process of rebuilding. Like, instead of I had to kind of remember how I did it, but I did this several times already. But basically, instead of baking a mesh for like multiple redundant objects, like all I really had to do was like bake most of the meshes that I needed, and then a few things are not baked, like the trench coat and the eyes. The eyes, for some reason, when you bake the eyes, they there's like this discoloring. One's bright and one's dark, so I left the eyes unbaked. But what in order to expedite this, I got the actual alpha or the stealth working again, but I didn't have to go and rebake, duplicate a bunch of stuff. I kind of took a shortcut where I didn't bake the eyes of the sunglasses, but the stealth happens so fast, you don't really see that the sunglasses, especially at a distance, that the sunglasses are clipping out, or the eyes. And that's perfectly fine with me, but everything else works, like the getting the magical cloth to work with the coat while in stealth. That's all working like it should. So it was actually I had to go in and make sure that everything that wasn't working. It's usually stuff that was tied to the armature, like the IK weapon position, things like footstep colliders, a lot of different stuff. Like there was a bit of work involved with making sure that all the functionality, most of the functionality, was rebuilt and working. But the one thing is that the now the IK polish is gone, is broken. There's nothing I can do about it. My aiming is still on. The aiming is still accurate, but the actual IK positioning to align this actually looks okay now. I don't know why. It was a little off before, but now it looks like it's perfect. I don't understand that. Well, aiming is definitely off. If you look at, maybe it isn't. Yeah, that looks okay. But anyways, you can look at other like. So for my purposes, it's good enough. Like for testing, I'm not gonna go back and polish the IK to like perfectly align, like especially for each state multiplied by each weapon. Like I'm not gonna do that again unless I have to do it for testing. Like I'll do new weapons, get them to like 100% polished. Like yeah, so you see like the elbow snaps up and it's just a little bit off. Like it's not exactly like it was, but um, I'm not gonna go redo all that work again. Just so something else can happen in the future before release, and then it breaks everything. Like for new weapons, I'll do the IK once for testing to make sure I get it to 100%, but I'm not going to redo the IK polish for all these weapons again, just in case I have to reconstruct my armature again. Something else goes wrong, I'm not gonna. It just makes sense from an efficiency standpoint because it takes a while to apply that polish. So that's just one of the things. As long as it looks good, operates. As long as the aim is true, I don't care about the IK alignment right now. But so there's that. So got it for the most part. There's things. I was thinking that there's something I left off for now. I think it's just the IK that I'm not. Yeah, I was talking like one of the things with the actual one of the things with the AI refactor. There's a handful of things that I decided to put off that are still broken with the refactor. Kind of like I think there's things surrounding the state behavior, like when the AI should be disabled when you move across sectors and stuff. That's more for like gameplay testing. But for the most part, the AI refactor is good. When it comes to this controller reconstruction, I think that it's pretty much back to the way it was, except for the IK alignment. So at this point, I was saying, okay, let's get back to what we were doing after we got sidetracked for a couple days. Like this whole week has been chomped up by, fixing the armature again to have the IK rig. Let's go ahead and do a test to see if we can um, if we can do a retargeting like we used to be able to do in Blender, which means you import an FBX from Mixamo, and then using Rococo Studio here, you kind of have to um, like retarget the animation to your armature. So I went through the tutorials again, and basically what was happening, you would do this, and it would kind of say, map the bones, and then their mapping was, they did like this their own automatic mapping, but the problem is it wasn't mapping the correct the bones from the source to the target like it was. So I had to go in and figure out through a tutorial which was the correct mapping, in order to get a Mixamo bone structure mapped to this my custom rig, right? And for the most part, you're doing a lot of rework. Like at first, it was not working at all; it was all messed up. But then, I actually got it pretty good looking. Where I had to scale the source armature down like I usually do and align it with mine, otherwise the scaling's off or whatever. But it was actually looking pretty, it was retargeting the animation pretty good. The only problem, I think I had this problem before, the actual hands were not retargeting correctly. The actual fingers, they were like way out here, and it didn't look right. It was all odd, and like that's kind of like a deal breaker where it's like you can retarget the rest of the animation pretty good, but if the hands aren't right, the fingers are all. And I was sure that I'm mapping the darn fingers correctly to the Mixamo rig, but for some reason they are not. They're not. I couldn't figure out why the fingers weren't working. So I could spend more time trying to fix that, but at this point I kind of threw in the towel. It's like, I can't get the fingers right. This is not going to work for remapping and modifying an animation in Blender. Like, I'm kind of questioning, like, why did I go in and rebuild my armature to support IK in the first place if I can't get the retargeting working? Wasn't that the whole point, right? Well, I kind of said, at least, now I can do custom animations in Blender from scratch with my IK rig. That's still an option. But, it's like, I'm like, that doesn't really help me, like I kind of need a situation where, like previously I had retargeting working and I proved the concept in Blender, but now it's like, unless I come back and figure out how to fix the hands, retargeting in Blender is pretty much done for now. And I was kind of sitting here like, okay, well, I still need a custom animation to get grabbed, after all this work and time. It's like, what am I gonna do, So I was kind of looking around, and I was kind of like, is there any other solutions for retargeting in Blender? Not really. The Rococo's the number, and it's just like, you get what you pay for, I guess, with Rococo. Like, and I was just tired of. So then I remembered I had this this tool called UMotion Editor. I had bought UMotion Editor Pro or whatever, and I was kind of like, can I do a retargeting kind of thing in I had only gone on this package on a surface level, kind of like, oh, it's interesting, I can do animation here, but when would I ever need this? Well, I decided to take another look at this package and figure out if I could do a retargeting kind of situation where I can import an animation and then modify the animation to my needs, right? And lo and behold, yes, it is true. And why does it work is because it's not mapped. You're importing animation, and like everything, like it's kind of like an adapter. Like the animation rig you import, if you make it green on humanoid for the avatar, and your mechanism rig from your custom armature map screen to the Mechanim avatar. That's the bridge. So you can actually import a an animation. Let's see if I can get the original animation. This is the original animation that I imported from Mixamo, and it starts off from here, and it's just a hanging animation. This is the closest I can get, right? And I'm able to map this animation and actually have these like override layers where I could actually. The tricky part was like I had to go through and kind of go through the tutorial videos and actually figure out, you know, how to use this package, all these little settings and stuff, how to set up a basic animation, how to it was relatively painless, but you can set up basic IK where you can move the hands and the rest of the bones follow, and the legs. It's not as fancy as the Blender IK. It's not as fancy as the Blender IK. Like, it doesn't have like a hip manipulator, but you can get the job done. And but you can also customize your IK to actually add something like that if you wanted to. But so I had to get familiar with like this whole setup here. But after a while working around with it, testing it, I was actually able to figure out how to do something where you could overwrite the arms position. The trick is Mixamo is like an FK, but you can actually import it to map the FK to IK, so you can edit with IK. You don't have to edit with FK. So once I had that figured out, I could go ahead and tailor this original animation to kind of move the arms from an up position to like a down position that are kind of tight and close to the body, kind of like she's being being grabbed by the snake tail or whatever, and then kind of adjust the head position, keyframe the head position to different points to my liking to make it look like there is this this grabbing animation, and I think it looks pretty good. For the most part, it does the job. One of the things I was messing around with, this is my first go at the first thing I was trying to do. I was trying to make a go, like, now that I kind of understood, I was trying to make a go at like the hop strafe animation, right? And as you can see, like, this is like my best end result, and it's not very good. I took the original animation. I tried to apply techniques in order to get it to a point where she's kind of hopping along. And I tried a lot of different things, and there's other tools on in Unreal where you can. The main problem was my other animation. It was more acceptable because it was not a loop. Like, it's not intended to loop. It's intended to play the animation once and not loop back on itself. What happens when you're trying to do a loop, especially with this tool? You have to get the first frame and the last frame perfectly aligned, and in order to do that in this package, you pretty much have to go through each one of these curves. Like, position, you can, and you kind of have to even them out to the ending. Like, they curve naturally, they don't spike, otherwise you see this big jump at the last frame, like, and that's really painstaking. You have to go in, and then you have to convert from quaternion to Euler and do the same thing for each one of these bones all the way down the list. I kind of skipped the hands, but you kind of get the idea. It takes a lot of time, and you can get a fairly decent result um, in matching in a loop, but that's really time consuming. Like I tried to figure out how to make it work, but then the problem comes in when you try to add like layer overrides to um, the loop, you know, because the original animation clip, it might be hopping backwards or it just might not be aligned. So you add these overrides and the end result, it just looks very... The more you add these overrides, the more you degrade the original motion capture animation where all this clean animation data is. And it's like, so I got this like result. I could never get a decent enough result in order to sign off and be like, yeah, I'm going to use that in the game. It just got to this point, especially for this situation, that the juice was not worth the squeeze. Like, there's no way I'm going to be using that. Like, it was a good test and a good realization. Like, this tool can do certain things. It's good in like the context of what I was doing here, and I think it worked as far as like a retargeting solution. But when you're trying to do a loop, like, I think Blender might have something better when it comes to that. But this one is just not able to cut the mustard as far as when it comes to looping. You're doing a lot of manual work, and it just doesn't. So it's capable of some things, like it can retarget, you can't customize animations like in this case. But when you're trying to do a loop, it's really a lot of it's really, you know. And another thing I learned in this process is, like, while you can do animations from scratch, like, you want to avoid that, because I was just trying to do like the initial um, I was trying to do the initial skip hop from with no imported animation, and just doing this little animation here, like, you don't get all that fine detail of like working off of like a motion captured animation. Like, doing it all from scratch, that's not practical either. Like, I'm not an animator. I don't have like like trying to figure out like how a character moves, like with a jump, like sideways or whatever, like with no prior experience, like trying to animate by hand, like it's gonna really show. It's gonna look unnatural. It's gonna look mechanical, and it's not gonna be able to. I'm not gonna be able to use that. So I kind of scrapped the whole. I gave it a good try, and I got a lot of. It was kind of like an experimental thing, but at the end of the day, I figured out like what works and what doesn't. So, um, so after getting my grab animation working, it was just a matter of putting the pieces together with the animator, and yeah, you always have to clear this before you run it again, otherwise it gets messed up, and if the scenes get saved, then you have to. But so it was just a matter of working with the new behavior state machine and then writing methods of actions to actually execute and then aligning. So I'm at the beginning stages of that, and we have this like basic. So after all that work and run around and a lot of work done this week, I have just a smidgen of new progress to show as a demo, which is the snake. Now he can spot you, and if he gets close enough, he will grab you like that. It's like it'll do the tail grab, and then it'll execute um, the actual custom animation. So, so the presentation of a game, you see a little bit up front, but there's a whole lot that goes under, especially when things break on you. You have to, again, it feels like you're redoing work and it's wasted, but There's, that's just the cost of doing business around here, and that's how it goes in the software development and game development business. So, um, that's pretty much where I ended this week. Like, obviously, there's a lot more to do. Like, I can actually modify this animation to be closer to bite the target better, and there's just a whole bunch more. So more next week, like I discussed. But it is one of those weeks. I did a lot, but it's as far as progress goes, um, maybe next week I can finally show some real actual progress without having to get caught in a trap of redoing work I've done already. But that's just neither here nor there. So, yeah, that's all I have to talk about this week, and we will sign off and check you next time.